Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Stephen Nussbaum. In the podcast, I invite my guests to come on, talk about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they also get to collate their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. Before I introduce this episode, just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who messaged, who engaged with, and who listened to the return of the Fantastival podcast. We came back last week with episode 176 with Frank Leese from Press Club. Frank was a top guy, Press Club, a great band, and Frank's fantasy festival lineup was absolutely superb. Really enjoyed that one. So if you haven't already done so, please go back into the Fantastival vaults and give that one a listen. So today's episode, this isn't a Fantastival as it stands. This is a combined effort with myself, with Carl from the RGM Podcast, alongside Martin Morel from Time for Heroes podcast. This was all driven by Carl. He got me and Martin into a group and said, let's do a podcast about podcasting, basically. It was a great idea. We all had a great chat. We shared kind of the struggles that doing a podcast brings, the triumphs it brings as well, the community that you get and you gain from doing a podcast, and just great times, really. So this was a really enjoyable chat. It's the first one we've done. There could be more throughout the year, depending on how this one goes. I think we felt it all went really well. We really enjoyed it. I've had Carl on as a guest on this very podcast before. Martin will be on in the next few weeks or months. But great chat. Great guys. If you enjoy the Fantastical Podcast and currently don't listen to the RGM Podcast or Time for Heroes, please make sure to do so. Two great podcasts, two great chaps. I hope you enjoy all the insight this episode brings, and enjoy Carl, Martin and myself in the, I guess, first edition or episode of When Three Podcasts Clash.
Right then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another, I was going to say then, before we start, an RGM podcast, but that's not true this week, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a bit of a special episode on his hands, and I came up with an idea, right? Bear with me. I feel that, I watch a lot of like podcasts and that kind of stuff, and particularly American podcasts, and there's a big community out there where they get each other on each other's shows, and I haven't really been seeing that out there in the market, ladies and gentlemen. So I wanted to reach out to two other great music podcasts out there, and let's all share each other's experience of, being in the music industry and sharing our stories through our podcasts. Let's all get together and have a chat, shoot the shit, have a bit of fun, introduce each other's to each other's podcast, and have a bit of a laugh. So if you're listening on Time for Heroes or the Fantastival Podcast, this is a bit of a new voice for you, but you're going to be hearing your hosts next. So ladies and gentlemen, we've got three podcasters on hands. I'm Carl from the RGM Experience Podcast. We've got Martin Morel from Time for Heroes and Stephen Nussbaum from the Fantastival Podcast. Hey up, lads.
All right, Carol.
You all right?
Pleasure to come on to this. A brilliant idea.
Yeah. Well, we can see how we go, really. We've got no real structure to it, but we've all done this before. We know how to talk. We know how to get through another episode, don't we? Sometimes, because I don't know about you guys. It's and I don't really think the outside world appreciates how much hard work you have to put into, particularly a weekly podcast, or even more. Some guys do. So yeah, introduce yourselves to let's everybody introduce themselves and then get going.
Brilliant. Well, I start.
Go on then, mate.
So I'm Martin Morel. I got a frog in my throat. No. I'm Martin Morel. I host the Time for Heroes podcast, which I've been doing since lockdown, sometime around about then. That's when I get the idea to do podcasts. Initially, I had another podcast called the Typical Time Podcast, which was based around the Dundee band, The View. I got the idea for the very first podcast I listened to was the Oasis podcast. So that's where I kind of get the idea to focus on a band. And I did 8 episodes there, never interviewed any member of the band. And it was a struggle. And I thought, right, I'm gonna reach out, I'm gonna branch out and make it a bigger podcast where I can get different guests, and that's where Time for Heroes came along, and I was able to kind of interview any musician I wanted. It didn't need to be based on this band. Since then, in the 4 years I've been doing it, I've had every member of the View on. So
No.
mental that I couldn't get them on the actual podcast that I wanted, but that's the way it goes. But I started it in lockdown. I've been doing it. I've moved from the kitchen to the living room. I've moved from free Zoom to paid Zoom, and that's about it. But in the 4 years, if you look back at the guests that I've had, you can see the progression. And hopefully in the next 4 years, I'll hear Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher and Paul McCartney and people like that.
That'd be the dream, wouldn't it? My dream.
Yeah, so that's me. That's a podcast in a nutshell. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go further on. But that's it for me. So probably into you now, Steve.
Yeah, so I'm Steve Nussbaum. I host the Fantastival Podcast. So anyone who listens to my pod would have heard Carl about 9 months ago, I think, give or take. So I do podcast on the Orient Outlook podcast, which started 10 years ago, and that's still going strong. But over COVID, all football got not postponed. Well, it did get postponed, didn't it? So football got postponed, and I was kind of sitting there on furlough, getting involved in the Tim Burgess's listening parties, and I thought this is a really cool idea. He's building a really good community at a time of struggle and uncertainty. It seems to be a project for Tim that brought everyone together. And then I started thinking, well, the Orient podcast is on hiatus because we don't even know if the world's going to be here in 6 months' time. And one thing I do know is that I can't talk to all my mates about Leighton Orient, but I can talk to all my mates about music. And then I thought, I don't want it to be just a standard podcast of, what music do you like? Who do you listen to? I wanted to kind of get a spin on it. And then I started thinking about all the different angles of what could happen. And then the idea of the Fantasy Festival came to me. And so the idea of the Fantastival Podcast was born from there, really. And at first, it was just a way of me keeping up to date and checking in with my pals. So the first, I would say, 40 episodes are me and my mates just talking about gigs and fun. And naturally, I guess, as you get a bit of momentum behind you, you start kind of going off into different areas. So I work for HMV. There's a lot of ex-HMV whose musical knowledge is massive, and branched out into a few of those people, and then branched out to a few new music people. And then before you know it, you've hit a community and a whole different world that you didn't know existed. So very quickly, it became what I thought would be kind of a COVID lockdown small solo project. To 5 years later, 175 episodes in pretty much every week, barring the last couple of months that I can go into if we need to. But I'm happy to say this is like the second podcast back, and it's back hopefully to do on a weekly basis. But Carl, you touched on a really important point earlier. I think when you're doing the intros, it is hard to maintain a weekly podcast. A lot goes into it. The actual recording and the Zoom is actually probably like the easiest part of it, I find. So, getting the guest list, arranging that can take quite a lot of work. There's quite a lot of chasing. There's emails that have to go out. There's connections you've got to make. And then once you've recorded, then you can edit as much as you want and not edit, which can be really long or really short. And then you need to spend your time in thinking about how you're going to approach, how you push the episode as well. So I'm quite relentless in mine. Some people will do one post and they'll leave it and they'll see what happens naturally. I'm the complete opposite. I'm 3 posts a day. I'm plugging as hard as I can as video content, because if someone's taken the time to come on the pod and I've worked hard at it, I'm like, I want everyone to listen to it, and whether it gets, I know, anything from 100 to 300 listens or more or less, for me, that's a huge achievement. So it takes an awful amount of time to do. So I commend both of you gents on the hard work that goes into it, because you, as a listener, you can listen to a 40-minute podcast and go, oh yeah, that was quite nice, and kind of dispose of it. But it's a lot more than the 40 minutes that people will hear on the other side of their headphones.
Yeah, innit? Just like, because making reels, because I do quite a lot of video content. I do use AI to create those create some for me. Just put some are created better than others, but there's just not enough time in the day. So I presume everybody works full time as well, and we do a passion project. It is my most favorite thing that I do on RGM, is having the. But my worst thing about doing it is doing all the socials and doing all that stuff. The chat's great, innit? But the hard work and things you have to do to promote the podcast is completely not.
It's also into the realm of the unknown because I guess we've all
Yeah,
had guests who might be high profile and you go, well, this should really, really get a lot of listens, a lot of traction, a lot of new
yeah,
followers. And sometimes they'll just plod along. And other
yeah,
times you can get maybe a lesser known guest and you think, well, this will do all right. It's just someone I wanted to speak to. And this
yeah,
probably won't engage as much as what a high profile one will. But actually, a lot of those times, it's sometimes a lower profile guest who can really take you
yeah,
by surprise, really gain you a new audience. So it's always an exciting kind of way or journey, I guess, each episode. So with me, I always announce on the Saturday evening, and I always look forward to that because I never kind of reveal who's coming on beforehand. So you get the
yeah,
anticipation of the Saturday, then
yeah.
you get the launch of the Sunday morning, and the Sunday is all exciting because you kind of,
Podcast.
you know, everyone tracks their listens. I like everyone goes, oh, I'm not really fussed about listens, but everyone
Yeah,
probably is, aren't they, to a certain extent. So you've got
yeah,
one eye on what's going on, you've got your social posts going, people reacting, and I guess everyone's kind of got their kind of core fan base.
yeah,
Sounds quite wanky, doesn't it? Core fan base. But everyone's got the guys who will listen and pick it
yeah,
up, and then kind of get the new guys, and then you might see your Spotify followers like go up a little bit. Oh, this is
yeah.
interesting. So it's always a bit of a view into the unknown at points, which makes it quite an exciting place to be.
I think what Stevie said there about the lesser guests, I think sometimes with the lesser guests as well, they're more inclined to engage in it and to share it on their socials.
Oh
A
yeah,
lot of the time, I find with the bigger guests, they just record a podcast and then
yeah,
they forgot about it. It's just
yeah,
kind of their PR that deal with it, so
yeah,
they don't bother sharing it, promoting it, and like that. Whereas the lesser guests that have got something to sell,
mm,
they're more inclined to kind of engage, and that's kind of what I've noticed probably the last few months where I've done it for the start of the year.
I think that's quite
The
common in
lesser
everything though.
guests,
Just sorting RGM out, we cover big guests, and they don't tend to share a post. But the little guys that we cover, they all share it because they love it, they appreciate it, and they probably live on their own socials where the bigger guests aren't, or they just think, I'm going to share it for that. That is a popular thing that come across on RGM, not just industry wide, which is a bit of a pain, but each
I
of their
mean,
own.
my socials give me the fear. I see like this TikTok and all that.
Yeah,
Like Stevie, you're brilliant on the videos you post
yeah,
on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook promoting it. I don't do any of that. I mean, I don't do a video podcast
no,
anyway. But it gives me the fear, and obviously I'm managing the band as well,
yeah.
and they don't engage in any socials. They hardly do any of that stuff. So it's really hard. But that's where you need to go. I'm giving the band a kick up the arse in it because they don't kind of start doing this. I'm not going to get anywhere, and I'll end up walking away.
It's a tough
Yeah, I
one.
mean, I guess the perception, isn't it, that you need to really drive your podcast, I guess, through your socials, right? So I guess when you're pitching to whoever you want to pitch to, the first thing they're going to do, if they've got a manager, is probably look at the Fantastival Podcast Twitter account, right? So you're
Yeah,
always trying to kind of build that. But I think through doing the podcast, I don't know kind of about you, James, but it's definitely made me more kind of self-confident. So before the pod, I would never be able to hold a video and walk and
yeah,
talk for a minute without
yeah,
even thinking about it, or you very quickly get used to the sound of your own voice very quickly. So
yeah,
I think that's how podcasting kind of helps you with that self-confidence. The videos are quite easy, actually,
yeah.
kind of once you start the self-promo. And Carl, I presume when you're editing, you're obviously watching yourself back when you're editing your video. So you become quite comfortable with the feel and the sound of your voice and your look.
The editing side of things is really quick. I keep a lot of it unless there's been a break in the Zoom video. You've got to bridge a gap. But generally, it is just record, and if Zoom don't mess up, then that'll be the conversation. Generally, I don't like editing. What is it that I don't like? The time it takes. And I think a conversation should be a conversation. I think if you're editing somebody's opinion, that don't sit well with me. If they say, it's always great when a guest says, "Are you all right?" When you ask them at the end, "Are you all right with that?" and they say, "Yeah." The guests that tend to say, "Now, can you edit this bit?" I'm always a bit wary of, and I don't
Mm.
because I stand by it. I just think, well, it's a conversation. We've just had a chat. It weren't that bad. People could overthink. You can overthink the editing process, I think. So I just keep it
Yeah.
natural and let it be free, which
I very
sounds a bit
rarely
wanky.
I don't really bother with the edit
Yeah,
as such because it is so time consuming. See if you think you've recorded a podcast and it lasts an hour,
yeah,
and then you need to go back and re-listen to it. I kind of think, see, once I get off the interview, you know whether it's went well or not, don't you?
yeah,
So I'm kind of like, right, that's fine. There's nothing needs done there. I'll just put it out. I'll just tidy up the loose ends either end and put it all together, and then it goes out. Going back, Carol, obviously, because we've kind of talked about our podcast. How did yours start? Because I can mind seeing I'm pretty sure it was you, like a wee video on YouTube. You sitting in a motor, maybe doing interviews with
Yes.
makers.
Well, I've always I've been doing RGM for over 10, so I've always been interviewing bands. I came up with an idea. I got an electric car many years, and I thought, well, these are quite. Can I get a guest in here, stick a camera somewhere on the dashboard, and record somebody while we're driving up? And it kind of took off. Carl's RGM road trip or something.
Yeah,
I had John McClure on and that kind of stuff, and he were like picked him up, and we had a drive about. He were impressed to be in an electric car and stuff back in the day, and that were all nice. And I found out that you should really have business. And when I looked into that, it was so much money that I just thought, I can't risk anymore. It was just an idea that were great. It caught off. People loved it. I had a few nice guests, Clint Boone and that, driving around M60 and, this kind of stuff, picked him up from his house, all that kind of stuff. Were brilliant. And I prefer things face to face, but having the risk of, having an accident. So I kind of had to park that. And I've always done interviews with bands. I've been podcasting like 10 years, doing Carl Maloney Presents and that kind of stuff. I all started doing a bit of a radio show, playing music and having a playlist and promoting bands and stuff that we do through RGM. But that kind of got problematic because there's license. Apple can or Spotify can block your podcast if you're playing music through it. So it's really problematic to play music through podcasts. So I kind of had to think about what am I going to do? Just talk there. So it was in lockdown again. Lockdowns created so many podcasts. It sounds like, and I'm nearly up to 200 now. So 200 weeks of me talking bollocks. But I kind of just decided to rebrand it all and do it. And call it the RGM Experience and go again, really, and start another series. As I said earlier, it's one of the favourite things that I do on the podcast. It is out of all the stuff we do on RGM. It's just fun. It helps me in loads of different ways as well, like communication and in general in the real world. I'm from a background when you like a lad's background and you don't go deeper into conversation. And I've always felt a little bit like a conversation. So this podcast for me has helped me develop my communication skills and get better at opening up more, really, and just having natural conversations with people where in the past it wouldn't have come naturally to me at all. And I once said, I've always been a bit of a daft lad. I've always had a big loud voice. I've always messed about a bit, but I'd never really had conversations. My wife will back me up with that as well, I think, So for me, it's really helped me develop my communication skills with people, just speak to people on a different I was doing.
I think when you talk music as well, it's quite an emotive subject.
Yeah.
So I never really thought about the mental health aspect of the podcast until a few people, and I had it a few weeks running where someone said, I've really found it quite therapeutic to talk about some of these early memories. And I thought, actually, I don't ask anything about mental health, but everyone keeps saying it's like a therapy session in some respects. So then that's when I started introducing the mental health question. And I always ask that first because I think if someone's not listened to the podcast before, it kind of doesn't catch them out, but it just makes them think, actually, this might be a bit of a different kind of podcast to the usual, tell us about your new album straight away. In there, and you always find that questions always unlocks like maybe what could be a barrier later on in the podcast, and that seems to open people up. And you get people talking about early memories, whether it's with their families, their friends, and some people will reveal far too much on a podcast, which is great for me because they start opening up really quickly. But it's a great way, like you said, of getting people who might not necessarily want to talk. Like some musicians are probably there just because they've got their agent or their manager telling them you should do this because it's quite good exposure, who probably aren't so good on a one-to-one basis. So I think it's a great learning tool about kind of myself, and I've found out a lot about myself through podcasting, and I'm sure it sounds like you have as well, Carl, and I'm sure you've found out the same, Martin.
Yeah, I mean with me, so I went to, once I left school, I went to college and I studied HN Media Studies.
I did that in Sheffield. I did one of them things.
So I done the first year. Then I had a spell in hospital for a couple of months, and I kind of dropped out the second year, and then fell into work. I've been working with Royal Mail for 23 years, and kind of that way you just get stuck in that rut. And it wasn't until COVID came along, and it's like, obviously I listened to podcasts all the time. And I thought, I'm going to do that. And doing this podcast is the first time I've used these skills, the media studies course, 23 years prior, and that's the first time I've used them. So it's funny how like COVID is kind of gave everybody that push. Obviously, I speak about it a lot with the bands that I speak to, and I always ask them how it would help their careers, and it's been a bigger help to most than that has been like a hurdle. But it's probably the same with podcasters. Obviously, you said, Carol, the amount of podcasts that have started during lockdown. I think it's definitely progressed. My confidence get better as I've done it more, as I've I went for the first podcast to the second podcast. Obviously, as I said, that first podcast was 8 episodes. If you go back and Google that, average time for a podcast, average amount of episodes is eight episodes before quit.
Yeah.
But the difference is I quit and then started again, and it's worked this time. So
I feel like you can't even really get to know how you're going to even evolve the podcast until you get up to at least 30 to 40 episodes. I feel like all those early episodes, you're kind of finding your way. So by the time I got to the Fantastival, I knew enough about podcasting that I was quite confident. But I remember with like the Orient Outlook, the first 9 or 10 episodes we recorded on GarageBand because we didn't know how else to record it. And GarageBand is obviously a free app on Apple, and the time limit is 32 minutes. Back then, you could not go over 32 minutes on GarageBand, so we had to literally keep a timer. And when we got to 30 minutes, no matter what we were talking about, we just had to stop it and literally do our outros and get out of there, because at 32 minutes it just cuts off. So you are constantly learning and evolving. And I think all 3 shows have found kind of their way forwards, unless there's going to be some kind of dramatic things that happen in the future with these podcasts. I feel like we've all kind of got our structures and guests, and obviously you can go well off topic. I remember, Cole, in my episode with you last year, I think the last 20 minutes, once we'd done your fantasy festival, I think we got into a bit of a discussion about podcasting, because it's quite nice, because you never quite know where your podcast might take you. Obviously they're music-based podcasts, but you can end up talking about something completely different, which is kind of where the enjoyment could come from.
I think a lot of people prefer to hear a conversation with a band rather than talk about the new album. A lot of people don't tend to. I find anyway that people don't really give a shit about it, but they want to hear some stories. They want to hear about their experiences. They want to hear about what they were like at school. They want to hear about whatever it is. And obviously, you've got to. I do tag it into the end, the promotion side of it. Once I've dug as deep as I can, possibly, into the psyche or to the what makes them tick and some daft stuff, and just try and get to the bottom of that person's personality rather than go straight into a fucking what's your new album like? It's brilliant, right? Okay, where do I go from there? You know what I mean? And they can be quite hard work, musicians, sometimes. If they all think they're fucking amazingly, like they're all cultured and they've got all these funny stories, but sometimes, particularly with the younger ones or the newer bands, you have to force a lot of stuff out of them, and that's quite a new skill I've developed as well, is getting the lesser known names to open up a little bit and not just think it's all about, oh, I've got this single out Friday, it's going to be very good. You know what I mean? There's more to it than that, isn't there? And it's a big skill to get them out of that zone and into a different mindset to give the people that are watching.
It's amazing to see kind of where some of these, I guess, independent new music acts are like a heading and they're going towards. And I guess again, without sounding too wanky, like we've been part of their upwards trajectory, right? So who knows in 3 or 4 years' time where some of the guests that we've had on over the last year or two could end up. So it's quite exciting watching the progression of some of these smaller acts, but also it's also quite exciting when, I guess the way your process is probably similar to mine. You get your time, you get your date, you arrange a Zoom call, you send your link, you're sitting there 5 minutes before on the Zoom, waiting for someone to join, and you're sitting there and you've got like a little buzz. There's that little buzz that starts going around, and then suddenly you get like a little flash on your screen going, John Power has entered your waiting room. And you're like,
Nice.
fuck!
I want to get out of here. I get it. I talk about it in the podcast quite a lot. And I think it's a little bit of like anxiety inside of me. I'm just like, every time, like when I get that notification that you've got a podcast in minutes, I'm like, why the fuck? I just want to be over there. I don't want to do it, but I do want to do it. But it's a bit of it. I don't know. It's like I don't know what it is inside me that just makes it. And you need a shit straight away. And it's just, oh Christ, we're off. too much information.
I'm like that as well. See, Sunday messaged me 10 minutes before the podcast and said, I'd be like, not a problem, fine. I do get the fear. I've never ever had that buzz. But once you're in, you start talking, it kind of goes right away. Kind of what you said, Stevie, about kind of how we're responsible maybe sometimes for how an artist's kind of career goes. So like, I was looking back at some of my episodes to see the one with Sam Herlihy for Hope of the States. If you listen back to that, I kind of feel a bit responsible for that band coming back and doing gigs last year, because when I interviewed them, there was no Hope of the States, there was no kind of he didn't even have the appetite to do the podcast. He's like, nobody's interested in the story, nobody wants to listen to me. And it was only through a good couple of days of messaging him and getting him to agree to come on the podcast. And you could hear him through the interview, kind of things going on in his head and thinking about maybe there is a market for them again. And then 6 months later, they announced they were going to these gigs, they hadn't toured in 20 odd years. And I kind of thought, well, is that part of my conversation with him that's got him to that? So I do kind of take the credit for things like that. So, but I mean, like the smaller bands as well. I know what you're saying with that, Carol, because I've had a couple of Florentines, and that was like 4 young boys, and it was like all one-word dancers. It's really hard to kind of get them to open up. Yeah. One of them had his mum sitting next to him. so it can be hard, but these are the things that you learn as you move in it.
It's always going to happen. You're always going to get different personalities, and everybody is completely different. And it's always nice when you like be a bit silly with them and they react to it well, because sometimes you can push it and they're just like. But when you make that connection with guests, like I've had Andrew Cushing on 4 times and I can't really remember. But since the first time I interviewed him in lockdown when he was just kicking off when he Noel Gallagher, it was just like I just felt a connection with him, and he was so open about what he was saying, and that's why I've had him on so many times on the podcast. When you do make that connection, really, it's nice.
You can see the connection as well.
Yeah,
you can see it. But I mean, obviously, I've had him on as well, and he is one of the guys as well. He is quite infectious and quite easy. Easy to get on with. So
a lot of people don't realize the cost of the podcast as well, because it comes out your own pocket, don't you? You have to pay, I think it's 16, 17 quid for Zoom now, because if you don't know, Zoom is free to use for about half an hour and then it cuts you off. I can remember doing podcasts, and as a Yorkshireman, I didn't want to pay for Zoom. And then I used to tell the guest, if it goes past half an hour, I'll email you another link after, and we'll start another chat after to start another 30 minutes. And that just became a pain in the ass. So I just thought, right, I'm just going to have to pay. And there's costs like that. There's equipment in there. There's time. I'm on Amazon every 5 minutes spending money on equipment, which I do love it, and I've built this like nice little since getting my new house last. People don't see that side of it either, do they? There's a cost, and I'm speaking for myself. I don't make a penny from the RGM. There's nothing.
No, same here. I don't. Yeah. I make the Orient Outlook has got a sponsor, and we do right out the Outlook. But in terms of the Fantastival, because you can go and deal with your podcast provider to get adverts put in, and then you get money for plays.
Yeah, you need like 5,000 a week or something to get that thing. I was looking into it.
Not even worth it.
Yeah, it's
not even worth it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like the right thing to do. Not to say that if someone offered me a wad of cash and said, I want to plaster your Fantastival with ads for my company, that I would be like, no, it's my artistic integrity. No way. But
it's the equivalent, it's the equivalent of a Saudi takeover at a football club, isn't it? I'm not getting ads for anything.
Well, I did have a sponsor once. I had Scott's Menswear, and it did become problematic. I had Tom Megan on, and they asked for their they asked for their branding to come off it. They didn't want to be linked to a story on the news, which is fair enough. Each of them. And so to re-edit, upload stuff, sort it all out, but they went busted, and so hey-oh.
Yeah, that's a minefield. See, once you start doing that, because then you've not got control of your podcast, don't you know?
Yeah.
On the Tom Mean thing, because I kind of talk about that quite a bit. I mean, I see like now he's still getting the festivals this year. They're still kind of chatting him getting chucked off bills. This has been going on for 2 or 3 years now. What's kind of your thoughts on that?
I personally think, because I've had him on the podcast twice. The first time I had him on, got a little bit of stick online for it. After building up a bit of a relationship, I went to see his gig at O2 Ritz, said hello, and I just felt like I got on with him well, and I just think he's paid his dues. He was with his wife at the time. It was with his wife. He's still got a loving relationship with his wife. I feel like he's paid his dues personally. And you can't hang somebody forever. You can have your own decision on it and make your own mind on whether you're going to invest it again or do whatever. That's your person. But just from speaking to him and the music that he makes is obvious from the lyrics that he's apologized. For me, he's paid his dues and everybody's allowed to. But I appreciate.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. And I mean, my big sister suffered from domestic abuse for years, so I understand the feeling with stuff like that. But I think there was a lot more to it. You know what I mean? There was a lot more, obviously, as you talk about in your podcast, Stevie, about mental health. There's a lot of mental health going on with Tom at the time as well. And I don't think the band helped him. I don't think the band were what it should be. And yet, we're now kind of 5-6 years in the line, he's still been punished for it. I think he's tried his hardest to make amends, and he's still with his wife now. So let the guy go out and do what he's best at. He's a front man, a bona fide front man, and people are trying to stop him earn a living doing what he's good at. I think it's shocking, to be fair.
I mean, there's a lot of mental health. I mean, there's podcasts now for everything, right, these days. There's loads of like mental health podcasts. There's some really good ones out there, and it's interesting listening to quite a few of them. I listened to one recently with Roman, I can't say his surname, Radnanathan, the comedian. The guy who goes out with Rob Beckett, not goes out of him, but does like the partnerships with Rob Beckett. And he's got like an amazing mental health story. So there's so much kind of out there. I feel on the Tom thing, people will have their own view of it. He was obviously in one of the biggest bands in the UK and is now, no disrespect to the venues he's playing venues that Kasabian wouldn't have looked at twice in their heyday. So he's obviously suffered off the back of that. And I can see why people would want to stand by him, but I could also, to be fair, see why people would go, actually, I don't want to. However, you know, that is quite well documented, and there's probably a lot more going on in other bands and artists that aren't documented that probably, if they were, you'd probably run a mile from them. So it's a tough one. Although he, manager at HV Leicester recently retired, and he knew Tom, and Tom recorded him a video, which he didn't have to. Recorded him like a farewell, happy retirement video, which was absolute quality. So I haven't met him. He's not been on my pod. It's got a theme of like people going on your pods and not coming on my pod. So Andrew Cushing and Tom, mate. And if you're watching this, mate, give me a bell. Come on.
We'll tag him in it.
But he didn't have to do that, and he did, and he seemed like a sound guy. You know, it's a very difficult one. I was sniffing around. I can't remember his name. The frontman for Hurricane Number One. This was like a couple of years ago, and he said something, got posted something about the BLM movement, and got a really negative feedback. And I was like, I think he friend requested me, and I thought, well, he's obviously requesting me for the Fantastival. He's not just found me and like look at my photo. He's obviously seen me interviewing a few of the old kind of Britpop acts, and he obviously wants to come on. And I kind of thought, oh, shan't I? And I can't remember. I asked someone, and I was like, what do you think on this? Someone whose opinion I respected, and they were like, you should probably stay away for the time being because there's still a lot of heat coming from what he said. And I didn't bother following it up, which probably wasn't the right thing to do at the time. It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's really difficult.
It is difficult with that kind of stuff, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. You just have to. Yeah, I think you'll just have to be able to justify it. There has to be a reason, not just for views, I suppose. So if you can justify why you're doing it, then because all in the comments and stuff, it's all like blah blah blah, all standard stuff that you'd expect. Why are you doing this? Even off friends, it's just like why you're giving airtime to certain people. This is why. All you know, that's kind of where I come from. You mentioned earlier, Stephen, you've taken a bit of break from your podcast.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned.
Is that something you'd want to talk about?
Yeah, I could talk about it. I guess the time it takes to make a podcast is quite long, like we've mentioned. You've got to record it, arrange it, follow up, and everything that comes out during the social posts in the week. And my mum got admitted to hospital like in early August, and by that time you're always running. I don't know how far ahead you run, but I've always got like 3 or 4 in the pipeline, and I always try and record them quite closely to putting them out there so people don't forget about them. I used to like backdate them massively to the point where by the time I was putting out a podcast, I'd almost forgotten about it myself. So got to August, I was in hospital a lot of the time, and I thought this is going to be really difficult for me to kind of follow up and keep producing. And we got to, I think it was like early October, and I was like, this is getting really difficult to maintain. So I took a break from it, and then just was too busy to get back into it. And unfortunately, my mum passed away in December. January and February were write-offs. And then I got into March, and I thought, it's quite difficult to get that momentum back because when you're in that world of podcasting, you don't realize it, and I'm sure you just probably don't realize it, but you've got a lot of momentum behind you. You're like doing it weekly. You're not even thinking about it. You're following up leads. You're emailing people. You're posting, and your momentum is taking you forwards. Where if you stop doing that for 3 or 4 months, you actually look back and go, "Fuck, that's so much work that I've actually done." And I thought this is going to be not a ball ache, but this is some effort to start this again. This is going to take my Twitter, not that I had thousands of followers, but I went from like 1.5k, which I was quite proud of because I think there weren't many bots in there. Normally you can spot bots who follow you. There weren't many bots. It's all real people, which is really nice. That went down. Obviously, you had all the stuff with Twitter and those people migrating to Blue Sky. So I think naturally I lost about 150 followers off Twitter. And you're thinking it's like 10% of the audience on Twitter, which people do look at. So that went, and you think I need to build this up again. So I sent a few emails out of leads I had and said, "Hello, remember me? It's me again. I'm hassling you again." And some people came back straight away, and I was like, "This is brilliant." Some people haven't replied. That's always gonna happen. But you get that when you send that email, you already kind of get that buzz back, and people replied. And I'm glad to say, but by the time this goes out, I would have been one episode back, and I've already recorded another episode forthcoming. So I recorded my first episode back, just gone. And then on the same day, I had someone who was suggested to me, and I thought, he won't do it, it's too high profile, come back and said, "Oh, I can do it on this day at this time." And I was like, could I record 2 Fantastivals in 2 days after not doing a Fantastival in 7 months? So I literally done one at 10 a.m. my time, because it was an Australian band, and it was 7 p.m. their time. And then I done another one at 6:30 on the same day, and I thought, yeah, this is brilliant. Like, I've missed this. This is great. The actual conversation and people talking about their musical journey is like superb. And so, yeah, it's happy to be back. I think I've underestimated how much work it is to kind of get it back and that momentum. And I'm kind of in this world where my comeback episode hasn't come out yet, and I'm not skeptical, but I'm unsure as to if it's going to be a while to get back to that listening base to what I had. The reaction's been very good, and I'm very grateful for that on Twitter. But like you said, you're not quite sure. Some episodes you think will be massive aren't. Some episodes you think might not be so massive are. I don't know how long it would take me to get back into that realm of getting engagement. And guess, the TikTok, very kindly, Martin, you mentioned my TikTok earlier. I was hitting about 1,000 views on TikTok, which I was quite happy with. The new one came back, hit 250, and I'm like, it's the algorithms are fucked. Like, my algorithm is gone. Whatever was pushing me up the algorithm very minutely is now kind of left me, and it's all about building that back up. So it's hard, especially after you take a 7-month break. Not the actual recording, but getting back into the world of doing it all. And I was in that world of new music, independent music, and I knew exactly what was coming out when. I haven't followed it as closely, and I'm completely lost. There's loads of new bands who I've lost track of. There seems to be bands who aren't doing it anymore. There seems to be artists who've got much bigger. So if you don't remain focused on it, you can very quickly lose your track of it, which I didn't realize the impact of that.
Being a slave to the algorithm. And they say in podcasts, you've got to be consistent. It's got to go out in day. You know what I mean? All that kind of shit. I can't be doing with that kind of stuff. I'm not going to be a slave to no fucker, and particularly an algorithm. I try my best to get one out every week, and I used to worry when I'd not quite got a guest for the next week, but I kind of just give myself a break from it now. Well, you're only human, you're doing this thing for now. You've got a few people that like it, that enjoy it. Fair enough. They might be a little bit disappointed that you're not there for a week, but they'll be all right. I've stopped. I've stopped beating myself up about it. Really, if I do have to miss it mentally, I have to let that.
Do you guys have an ambition for the pod? Is there one overarching ambition? So Carl and Martin, if you said perfect world, where does Time for Heroes land in a year? Like, what is the goal? Is there a goal?
I'd like to leave my job and it pay me like a full-time wage. That would be like a dream goal, but I just can't see that happen. But that is like a goal. I'm trying to do it as professional as I can to be the best at it. But I just think, who knows? You never know. It's such a saturated market. It's billions of podcasts out. To try and break through, even getting close to the league tables and that kind of stuff is hard work. So the honest answer is I don't know. The honest answer is I am ambitious with it. I would like it at least fund its own costs. That'd be great. Like 17 quid a month for Zoom. Cover that'd be amazing just to start. Have you
thought about the buy me a coffee thing? Because this seems to be something that's building. So I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you've seen
I've got like a little. I've got
there's
like a leave as a tip thing on my link tree, but
Oh, you've got that.
yeah, but like not many people do. But
Yeah, I mean, I'd be similar to Carol. If I could make a living out of this, I mean, like I would much rather be sitting talking to rock stars than getting into Royal Mail on the night shift and put parcels on a belt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For 8 hours, it'd be my dream. Obviously, that's what I did at college 23 years ago. So that's what I wanted younger, and that I've got this opportunity. But I can't see me quitting my job anytime soon. But it's just about kind of keeping the momentum up and getting bigger guests. And obviously, mine's is called Time for Heroes. I do kind of say quite a bit. Everybody that I have on my podcast is in some way a hero of mine. That's why I bothered to take the time to get them on. So I just keep doing it and keep speaking to people. I have been in the last few weeks looking at actors and people like that, but they're so hard to get on. Obviously, I don't know, there's some big kind of programs. You see some big dramas with some big actors in it, and I've been sending emails out, but I really hard to. It's easier to get a musician than it is to get an actor. But maybe I'm going for too big an actor. You know what I mean? I want a Stevie Graham or a Robert Carlyle or something like
Tom
that.
Cruise, full Scientology podcast with Tom Cruise.
Yeah. But I think as well what I do is I'm constantly writing lists of guests in, and then I find them like 6 months later, and then I think, well, look, I've got 5 of them. So that kind of thing, if you write things down, then it will happen. I do kind of believe in that to an extent.
What about you, Steve?
What's that, sorry?
What about yourself? What's your ambition for you?
Do you know what? Until I asked that question, I hadn't really thought about it. Just to have a constant. Do you know what? Financially, I'm kind of past the point of thinking it will happen financially. I guess mine is just to have a catalogue of episodes that I'm proud of, which might sound fucking stupid, but I look back and I'm so proud of my guest list. I've got people who I hadn't spoken to in 20 years who literally messaged me saying, "Mate, this is amazing," and I'm like, "Do you want to come on and be a guest?" And they're like, "Yes." So I'm really proud of some of those episodes. I've got, Sharon Jones, who's a dear friend who passed away about 2 years ago. She's like episode 29. That memory of me and her on that Fantastival, that is always there. That episode 100 of me and my mum is that is always there. No one can take that away. That's always available. I'm forever grateful. As well as that, I've got, if you would have told 16-year-old Steve he would have been speaking to John Power, Damon from Ocean Colour Scene, that world, would not have believed for a second. Saffron from Republica, like those kind of people. I just would never have gone, A, this kid would have never spoken to anyone because this kid didn't speak when he was younger. And B, in what world would I be hanging out one-on-one, even though it's virtually, to these people? So, no, the ambition is to keep it going and just to keep it honest. And that might sound ridiculous. That's why I don't really go to PR companies as it stands. So every approach I make is an email from me, not to a blanket marketing or managing company. It's me going direct to artists. So I haven't really thought about going to PR agencies because once you do, you kind of you're not as in control of it as what you are. So a lot of the time I'm going direct into the artist. I mean, I've had some amazing rejections. I had a rejection from Bryan Adams about 4 years ago, and I was like, wow, I've actually got an email rejection from his manager. Which I was proud of. I got one from Nils Lofgren, who's Springsteen's guitarist, a couple of years ago. When I was sending emails, I was hunting out these management companies, but just making specific approaches to specific artists. So I had some amazing rejections. But again, when you get someone goes, "Yeah, actually, I'm up for this," and Mark, you must have felt the same when you've eventually got Sam. You're like, amazing. I don't care who listens. It's just going to be an amazing chance to get to talk to someone about their life, their music, and their. For me, the Fantasy Festival lineup element on my podcast is amazing because you never know who's going to take you down what alley, and that can spiral a podcast into so many different facets. And because it's 5 acts and an encore, no guest is ever going to give you the same lineup ever with the same encore, and so you're never quite prepared of what route it's going to take you down. So.
Even preparing for yours, Steve, because there's that many bands you could pick. I think I were a bit of a pain in the arse on you because I think I end up picking 2 festival lineups because I couldn't fit all I wanted to into it. I just had to. It's as a guest on it, it's difficult to. Cause you're particularly me. I'm always thinking I'm missing, and you
I had a
are.
band who I had a guitarist in the band who was like, "Yeah, we'll do it," and I was like, "Oh, brilliant!" And then I sent him the spec, and he went, "Oh, sorry, we can't do it." And I thought, you've looked at the spec, and you thought, "Fuck this, it's too much work on on the part of the
Yeah.
guests." And I thought, well, "Fuck you." But yeah, it is all. There's nothing more I love than when like someone joins a Zoom and they're like, "Do you know what? Like, I've really had to really think about this fantasy festival," and I'm like, "Well, good, because as a guest, like,
Yeah.
it's not just the standard questions. You've had to go away and think about what you're going
Yeah.
to do and how you're going to
Yeah.
approach this podcast. So even if they don't enjoy the experience, they go, right, boring. That guy's just asked me what my fantasy festival is. They've had to go, unless people go and do it on the fly, and some people do it on the fly, which is
Yeah.
quite funny because you see the panic on their face when they haven't quite read the spec. You can see,
Yeah.
yeah, where would I hold it? So. I do like the fact that the guests kind of have to work or have a pre-notion of what they're going to come to the podcast on, as opposed to buy my new album, it's £5 on iTunes or it's 9.99 from HMV, or you can get it on red vinyl or blue vinyl or whatever. It's not. I do like that. But yeah. Like anyone, if someone said to me, "Look, we're going to take your podcast. Don't worry about working anymore. We're going to build a
Yeah.
studio for you out your back," that would be incredible.
Yeah, I do like it when I see podcasts. I've just started watching the Blue Monkey podcast. Shout out to those guys. Started
Yeah.
watching some of their content, and they've got their own studio where it's like when you see the American podcasts where they've got a proper studio and it's like a telly with stuff on internet, and even like, you know, lads at their level, they're still, the production for their podcast amazing. And it's just that I'd love to have my own little studio somewhere that pays for it, just out of the way, and then I can bother people every week and go part time at work. That'd be the
There's some podcasts who do it full time and they do like 3 or 4 episodes a week. And I'm
Yeah.
like, when you're doing it that quickly, you're kind of undervaluing your episodes, I find. Like, once a week is perfect. And I wouldn't do
Yeah.
more than one a week, but
Yeah.
get people doing 2 or 3 episodes a week. And you're like, you don't get time to focus. And as a consumer, to listen to 2 or 3 podcasts a week of the same
It's a
plot,
lot,
it's quite a big ask for the consumer.
It's funny though as well. Like, so there over Easter, I done like the 5 episodes in the 5 days.
You mad bastard.
That's right, yeah.
Well, I mean, I had that backlog, but it's that kind of like, obviously you touched on, Stevie, that you had that time out. I was kind of the same. Like I stopped in September and I came back in January. And see, coming back in January, you kind of, you get that buzz once, as you say, once you start sending out the emails. And I think January's a good time in the music industry. Everybody's releasing albums. So between January and February, I had Pastel, Bill, Kyle Faulkner, Brooke, Tonto, all of them. Every week I was bringing out a podcast, and then it got to a point where I contacted that many people that I had so many, and I thought, I can't put these out every week. I didn't have time to kind of edit and record and do my job and be a husband and a father and all that. There's so much went into it, and I built up this backlog, and then I thought, Easter time, I'm just going to put the 5 out. And now I'm at a point where I've got this one, and then I'm recording on Sunday, but I've got nothing at the moment other than them. So it kind of, you do go through wee peaks and troughs, I think. And I think one of the things, like, obviously, like you said, Carl, about sometimes you worry if you've not got an episode to bring out. I think it's maybe a bit kind out of yourself and just beating yourself up, because I kind of believe that whatever audience you've built up, if they like you, then they'll let you have the break, and they'll come back and they'll listen whenever you're back.
And it's weird with shows sometimes, and sometimes a few days can go past and not many have listened, but then people just haven't got round to it yet. And then you see a big spike maybe the week after on a certain show or something like that, when they've people are busy, aren't they? You can't expect them when this show comes out on a Sunday. You can't expect them to be right. I'm putting an hour of my day away just to listen to this podcast. People just have busy lives and they get round to it whenever they get round to it, don't they? So sometimes when you see a show that's been out a week and you think, that could have done better, we're expecting a bit more from that one. It does, particularly on YouTube. You do see the numbers quite dramatically increase in time because people just get to it if they can, or whenever they can be asked.
You made a good point before, Martin. I think you mentioned loved ones. I think a big amount of kudos has to go to our loved ones, right? Because every Sunday night I'm doing the Outlook, and at least once a week I'm doing the Fantastival, and it's like, right, I'm doing the Fantastival this time. So my process is I go like in our office room, I shut the door. I'm like, right, I'm doing the Fantastival now. I'm not sure how long I'll be. I think I'll be quite quick. I always say to my wife, this will be a quick one. And it's never like a quick one. It's always at least like an hour. And no matter how long the pod is, the meetings will just be a quick one. I've done one with like people in America that the time difference and I'm up till like midnight and my wife's literally, I can hear her pacing like in the hall. She won't come and say, can you stop this? But she's pacing to let me know, like, can you hurry this up? So I feel like we all need to shout out our loved ones.
Too right. One curse.
Spouses, kids, pets.
Yeah, my pets are a pain, man. They're always there, always kind of climbing up on me at the most opportune moments.
my cats like to put their arse on me. A lot of little twats. Well, for me, I think I think we enjoyed that chat, lads, and I would ask anybody to pop onto. Within the link of the description of this podcast, it's going to have a link for Martin's Time for Heroes podcast, Stephen's Fantastival podcast. So just try each other out. That's the point of us all getting together, really, and having a good chat with each other's audience, chatting shit. I've really enjoyed this, lads.
Yeah, it's been really insightful. It's been really insightful, Martin and Carl. Carl, kudos to you for coming up with the idea, because it is a genius idea. Maybe we make this like a quarterly or like 6-monthly update on how the pods are doing and what's happened since we last checked in with one another. Definitely.
Well, leave a comment in the socials. Let's be all official and try and get some. Let's try and scrape some fucking engagement out of somewhere. Leave us a comment on the socials and say, would you like us to come back, and we will if you want.
I'd like that. I think it's nice to have this community.
Yeah.
It's funny how I've been talking to you, Stevie, on Messenger for quite a bit, and the same with yourself, Carol. And I did kind of mention a few months ago, I said, should we be talking like this, or are we rivals? But I don't think we are rivals. I think we're all pushing each other on.
Yeah, I think so.
We all enjoy each other, each other's company and each other's podcasts, and I think it's the way to go, is everybody give each other a leg up.
Yeah, we're definitely not rival. I sometimes Carl or Martin, you announce a guest, and I think, fuckers, fuck you. Well, how have you got that?
Well,
with you,
I've
Mike?
never had John Power.
When you got Sam Herrily, I thought, bastard, because I had messaged him on Insta, nothing, nada. I thought, how has he done that? But kudos to both of you. Like you said, you put in the work, you get the guests, and anyone you get, it's more of a friendly you bastards as opposed to you actual bastards.
Right. Well, I don't know what else to do, but just say thanks for everybody for listening. On behalf of me, Carl at RGM, Martin, Stephen, leave a little message for people of your podcasters, and we'll crack on and enjoy the rest of his day, I think. Go on then,
Stevie.
Go on.
How do I end my podcast? All right, thanks for listening, everyone. Please continue to spread the word, and that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.
And I'm Martin, and I'm just saying, tune in, listen to both these podcasts. RGM, Carol's doing a brilliant job with that. Listen for Stevie Nussbaum, his Fantastival return, and obviously come back and listen to me at Time for Heroes.
Thanks, lads. Really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your day. Toodaloo.
So there you have it. That was the first edition of Win 3 Podcast Clash with Carl from the RGM podcast, with Martin from Time for Heroes, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to that. Like I said, it was great. Some great insight there, some great chats, and the hour really did fly by. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to both Martin and Carl, and thank you to those gentlemen once again for taking the time to include me within that. So that is it for this week's edition of the Fantastival podcast. That very same edition is on the RGM platform, and it's on the Time for Heroes platforms as well. So if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes or wherever, and you want to go and find them, please do. You can also find those guys on their socials as well, which we shouted out in the episode. But two great guys, and I've very much valued being a part of the episode that you've just heard. So as always, I'll be back next week. The Fantastival Podcast will return with episode 177. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.